Well, I can tell you one thing I'm picking up on right now, though, in every situation where you're talking about when you were speaking to your employees, you ask a lot of very powerful questions. And so do you think that that was maybe a skill that you developed over time? Because everything that you've talked about is how do we be the best? How do we have an impact? How do we get people out of their seats? I mean, it's all these very, very powerful questions that are going to require a powerful answer. And to me, I think there's a lot of value in what you did there because it got them to maybe think at a higher level than they maybe normally would. Maybe, like you said, they have limiting beliefs where, well, how in the world are we going to sell this? But when you come to them with a question like, how do we fill this entire stadium? A massive question like that requires a massive response or a massive action step.
Right.
Would you agree that that's a skill that you maybe learned over time?
It's funny what you learn and you don't know you've learned it.
Yeah.
And it just kind of comes to you through, sometimes it's osmosis from hanging around with other people. And sometimes it's just, the innate curiosity that maybe somebody has sitting in a chair or something like that. But I was talking to a friend the other day that used to work for us, years and years ago. And he was telling me a story. He says, I remember when you came in and we're a mediocre team at this time. So we're playing at the Palace and we'd had our heyday. We won our championships and then we started being just sort of average. And we're averaging 14,000 people. And you came in one day to our staff meeting talking about me. And he said, how do we lead the league in attendance? And we're all looking at each other going, well, if we can win another 50 games, we can lead the league in attendance, but we're not. And, you said, wait a minute. We're averaging like 14,000 people a game. Okay. So we got to come up with another 7,000 people a game. Okay. So we know Saturdays, by and large, we're going to sell out. And we know Fridays, by and large, we're going to sell out. So now what does that leave us with? That leaves us with, 22 other games that we've got to be able to figure out a way to sell them out. Okay. So we're doing what in group sales and we're doing what in sponsorship. What if every sponsor got 200 tickets for such and such a game. And everybody's attitude went from, well, he's out of his mind to, he's out of his mind, but this could work. This could work. And once you get the team sort of pointed in the right direction that, can we do this? And what is this going to mean for us? Well, if we sell out the rest of this season, that means the season tickets next year are going to be in real demand because the greatest ticket, the easiest ticket to sell is the one you can't get. So you
momentum over years.
Momentum. You got to be able to put people in a position where they call you and you say, no, I just don't have the tickets. And then they need to call you sooner. I need to call for that game 2 weeks in advance, not 2 days in advance. And you create a demand that isn't there when you've always got tickets available. And so it changed the mindset of the people in the room, and they became bullish. So, when you're losing games, and if you're in professional sports, I mean, the toughest time is, you're playing, you start in October, and by November, you're out of it. We're not gonna accomplish anything this year. How do I get through the next 6 months of losing and having people tell me how bad the team is and so on and so forth? So you need something to rally around. And this took people who were kind of lost in their ennui to, okay, let's see what I can do. How can I help? How can I do this? How can I take, our employees and let's give the employees tickets. We haven't been able to do that in all these years. We've been sold out. How do we take care of them so they feel good and they feel part of this thing? And then we started announcing our sellouts. And tonight's the first sellout. Tonight, third sellout in a row. Tonight, our 14th sellout in a row. And you start planting that seed in the minds of the audience. And when you get up to like this is our 75th sellout, everybody who's been there for the last 75 has heard that announcement and knows this ticket is in demand, and I better hang on to my season tickets. And so it's a whole, you don't think about it when you're doing it, but everything plays a part.
Well, you're giving everybody the opportunity, though, to express their own interests, express their own talents, and showing that you believe that they can figure it out. And so maybe that's all that your staff and the people that worked with you alongside you, all they really needed was someone to say, I think you can figure it out. Yep. And so I think that a number of different things that you've said points to exactly that you believed in the people or you gave them the insight and belief that they can do it and they can figure it out. And that was all they needed to kind of open up and unleash what they wanted to do and what they could do for the company.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, I don't say there's tricks involved or something like that, but I remember when we were moving to the Palace, we had a really good sponsorship salesperson, but he was used to selling a sign for $20,000. And okay, now that we got a new building, we can sell it for $22,000. And so his ambition was always to be just a little bit better. And there were people out in Los Angeles working for the Lakers who would sell that same sign for $150,000. Well, how? And what's the sales pitch? And so on and so forth. So I hired the guy from LA to come in as a consultant and work just on sponsorship with our guy. And our guy's watching this guy, and he was a little bit full of crap, but what a salesman, you know. And he would come up with all these statistics and numbers and things like that. He'd come in with a book to show the company that was 23 pages thick of this and this and this, and here's the attendance, and here's the eyeballs, and here's how many times they'll look at it. Some of it's real, some of it's imaginary, but you know. That same person who was selling that sign for 22 didn't get it to 150, but he got it to 70, way more than he ever believed. And now once he sells it for 70, he forgets that other guy was ever here. And he's walking around like, you know, he is the cock of the walk here. Look what I did, you know. I got 70,000. He's bragging to his friends about what he did without realizing that he wasn't played. That sounds like such a negative thing, but he was helped and guided, and possibilities were shown to him that he didn't believe existed. But then once he was able to do it, now he's telling his people, guys, I just sold this for 70,000. If I can sell it for 70, you can sell it for 70. And you energize the entire staff by energizing the leader. And you know, it was a little trickery, but you know, it's just, I think it was good business.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, from start to finish, I mean, I've just seen you've had such a motivation to continue to improve over and over and over again, whether that was you doing it individually or through most of your career, inspiring others around you. Mm-hmm. Where do you feel that came from for you? Was it just competitive nature? Was it you wanting to truly just challenge yourself? Or why, from the day that you started your professional career, it seemed like every single year it was taking a step further to improve? What do you think inspired that in you? Because I think a lot of people out there maybe haven't thought about that enough to get the fire going for them. What for you created that fire?
Well, I think it was, I think I was always a competitive person. You know, we always tried to hire people who have been competitive. It was a question we would always ask people when they came in, you know, were you competitive? I don't mean you had to be an athlete. Were you competitive in school? I mean, did you want to be, you know, number one in math? Did you compete with your sisters or your brothers or anything like that to get better grades? I mean, because you got to find that juice. If you can find that juice, and I used to tell this to my son and all my kids actually, but I would say you can do anything if you make it a game. And that's what this has all been to me in my life, is a game, a competition. Yeah. And you know, could I have come out of college and set the world on fire selling insurance? I don't think so, because my mind wasn't there. But this job, because it's sports is easy to compete in. You know, you how many tickets did you sell today? How about tomorrow? What are you going to do? Did you win? But
it's all visible too, which is the painful part about it that we talked about. Sometimes the pain is the best motivator for you.
Yeah. But by the time I was 32, 33, I'd figured out how business worked. And I realized if this all ends tomorrow, I can go sell insurance, or I can go do something else, because I'll come up with my own metric in my mind. Did I sell more than she did? Did I sell more than he did? Am I the number one person in the office? Am I the number one person in the country? Am I the number one person in the state? I want to be, and I would make it a game, and I would challenge myself to win every single day. Yeah. And once I got there, you know, I just happened to be in a business where it really, really worked. But that was the essence of everything is competing. And competing sometimes looked on as a dirty word, and I think it's one of the things that makes business work. You know, and if you're just putting in the time and stuff like that, you know, you got to have a place for those in every organization, because somebody's got to do the books or whatever. But you can have an accountant that puts in time and makes sure that the debits match the credits and so on and so forth, or you can have an accountant that drives your business and is a salesperson in and of itself, going back to our previous conversation. And so I think that was the key. It was always in me but when am I ever going to be in a position of leadership where I can show it? And then it's just a matter of taking it and spreading it down throughout the organization. And then it's a lot of the things that all your guests talk about. Do you put in the time to be really successful, particularly as a CEO or a president of any organization? It's a 24-hour-a-day job. You may have it, on the back page or something like that, or in the back of your mind, way in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
But it never leaves you. It never leaves you. And you can be watching, a show on television and something hits you. It's completely unrelated. Maybe you're watching American Idol or something like that, and something they do makes you think, that would work in our business. And I used to always tell our people, don't look at what the Boston Celtics are doing, and don't look at what the Yankees are doing. What's McDonald's doing?
Yeah.
What's McDonald's doing to sell product, to increase traffic, to get people's awareness? Read magazines and see here's articles on this manufacturing company. What are they doing that merits an article, and what can we do that can get that kind of exposure?
Well, and to me, it's mind blowing to see that even at the level of, like you're saying, managing the Pistons, right? That to most people, that's insane. It's a massive thing. But to you were still looking at, hey, there's tons of companies that are doing way bigger and way better than we are.
Yeah.
And you're still realizing there's so much to learn from all these other categories, which is unbelievable.
I'll tell you, the other thing that's kind of interesting is in this, again, I always credit Bill Davidson on this stuff, but he let us spread our wings. So yeah, we're a basketball team, but then we're a basketball team with an arena. And then I said, well, we got an arena. Why don't we build an amphitheater? Because we're in this entertainment business now. We're the number one entertainment arena in the country in year one. So we draw up plans in the back of the property where the palace was to build an amphitheater. And let's take those same ideas. Let's do bunker suites. Let's do suites, subterranean suites. Nobody's ever seen those. Well, it all fell apart because we didn't have parking because of wetlands and everything like that. So the people from Pine Knob call us and say, are you still interested in that business? Because we're losing millions of dollars out here, and we would sell you ours. So suddenly we're in the amphitheater business. So we went out there. They had done 18 shows the previous year. You went to Pine Knob because that's where Aerosmith was playing. And so the act is why I went. Okay, can we change this thing like we did with the Palace, make it a fabulous experience? So we put millions of dollars into it. We tripled the number of concession stands, tripled the number of restrooms. We added additional entrances because people couldn't get in and get out. And then we went from 18 shows to 82. And we've got everything from Tony Bennett for the older folks to kid shows, and we just come on out and see how this. And it was the most successful amphitheater first year in the history of amphitheaters, and it went on for the next 19 years to be the number one amphitheater in the country because we had a different philosophy. Okay, so now we're in the amphitheater business. Well, what about minor league hockey? So we buy a minor league hockey team. What about soccer? Then we buy a soccer team, and then we buy the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I always had a hunger to let's take whatever our expertise is and see if we can apply it to something else and make that a winner. And we had an owner. A lot of owners would say, hey, we're doing great. Let's just leave well enough alone and let's keep our energy on the home fires. And instead, he was one of the, okay, let's keep doing that. And had Bill continued to live, we would have built a theater out here in Oakland County that I'm sure would have been extraordinarily successful. And then, unfortunately, we lost him.
Yeah. I mean, that's unbelievable to hear. I mean, everything that you're saying is ultimately showing that it doesn't necessarily matter what you're doing. Everything that you just explained are all completely different businesses, but you showed that it was repeatable through your process that you learned through what you started first. And I think that's really commendable, the fact that you were able to recognize kind of the core things that needed to happen to have that success. You were always learning. You were always curious about what was around you, what the best companies in the world were doing, and how can you infuse the right team to give them the freedom to do what they need to do and use their talents and their individual skills to ultimately build a great team that creates the result you're after. It doesn't necessarily matter if it was basketball, if it was music, if it was whatever it was. You're creating an amazing experience regardless. It had nothing to do with what actually was happening.
Right. And we felt we had certain core competencies, which every company has. What do you do well, and how will that transfer, or will that transfer to this sort of thing. And also at the same time, you're telling your people that you've done such a great job that we're going to do something else. And your role is going to expand. So you're not just booking the Palace, you're now booking an amphitheater. You're not just overseeing sales here, you're overseeing sales here and in Tampa, Florida. Well, how does that happen? I don't know, but it's pretty exciting, and it's a heck of a challenge. And in 2004, it was a pretty amazing thing because we won the NBA championship. Well, first of all, we won the Stanley Cup, and 8 days later, we won the NBA championship. Yeah, no big deal. We already had the WNBA championship, and a few months later, we won the Arena Football Championship. So we got 4 in basically a calendar year, which has never been done in the history of sports. And probably never will because nobody's crazy enough to own that many teams, actually. But when it all came together, I mean, it was surreal. We had no business winning the Stanley Cup. We really had no business beating the Lakers, who were starting 4 Hall of Famers on their team. But my gosh, I mean, I got a great review that year, by the way. It was that made it all worthwhile. Yeah. But I mean, you talk about an organization when we made sure that we got all our trophies in at the Palace, and everybody had to get a picture with themselves and all the trophies, because that was a picture that would never be taken again probably in the history of sports. So there they were, surrounded by it, and everybody went through, and everybody could take that picture with them, and for the rest of their lives they'll have that and say this was a magical year that I was part of.
Well, what's crazy is even the consistency that you have in expressing what you just talked about, right? Like from the top down, you talked about the team feeling and how everybody's working together, and in that situation exactly, you're talking about all these separate teams that have really nothing to do with each other, that are realizing in one moment that momentum, there's no doubt that they all benefited each other. Yes. And they all are correlated in one way, right? And so it's just amazing to see that you were able to, from the back office, create that type of culture where even the teams were understanding exactly what the people in your office were. So everybody was competing ultimately at the same level, whether you were on the court or in the office.
That's right.
It's unbelievable.
That's right. Yeah, and we were able, when we took Tampa, I think one of the other things that was kind of interesting is our CFO became the president of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Our number 2 salesperson in Detroit became the number 1 salesperson down there. Our number 2 sponsorship person became the number 1 sponsorship person in Tampa. So we were able to hit the ground running. And very similar to when Bill Davidson passed and his widow decided to sell the team, I got a call from the Illiches in downtown Detroit that own the Red Wings and the Tigers. And Chris Illich said, would you like to come down here? We're going to revitalize downtown Detroit. Wouldn't it be a great thing if someday you can walk down the street with your grandson and say, I had something to do with this transformation here in the city. Yeah. And so when I went down, the top 20 people from the Palace came with me. And so it's one thing for me to go in to talk to all these staffers from Red Wings and Tigers and say, hey, it's going to be different, and this is going to be great. And then, everybody's looking at you with a, stink eye because who is this new guy? And I had a little bit of credibility because we'd had some success. But to have that conversation and then have your head of sales be your right-hand guy, your head of sponsorship be your right-hand guy, so they could go and say, okay, here's what Tom said. Now, here's what he meant. Here's how we're going to put it into place. And then it made the
It just comes down to what it's the team.
Yes, it's the team.
You show up with 20 people that are all on board and supporting and have their own individual talents that they're going to express through your vision. I think that's so much more powerful than you walking in and saying, well, I'm going to guide this ship to success.
Yes.
That's unbelievable. You were able to, again, highlight those people's, give them the feeling like they're creating this. It's not just you going to that meeting. It's we're all going together.
Here's another story. It's a nothing story, but I'll tell it anyway.
I'm sure it's a good one.
So we have so we got our 20 people down there, and there's a blizzard coming, and in Little Caesars and all the teams and everything like that, they've never closed ever in the history of the company. But this is the mother of all blizzards. So the HR department down there in Illich World calls everybody and says, okay, if this is as bad as it is, we're setting up a phone number, and everybody call in tomorrow. Don't come to work. Call in tomorrow, and we'll tell you whether we're going to be open or not. And sure as heck, the blizzard hits. I mean, it's awful. And you call that number. We're closed today. Please be safe. Be careful. Stay home. We'll see you all, day after tomorrow or something like that. So of course I go in. There's one lane on the freeway, so I get down there, and there's nobody there. I mean, it's we worked in the Fox office building, and it's a ghost town. I mean, literally, there's maybe 2 other cars. Within a half an hour, every one of our Palace people showed up. Nobody called anybody. It was just the sort of the culture again, which I keep talking about, means that, hey, we go to work, let's go to work. And everybody showed up except one lady who got plowed in. And an hour later, she'd been out there with her shovel, got out and came in.
Oh my goodness.
It was one of my, it's a silly thing, my proudest moments, because that meant people got it. Our people listened.
And cared and believed in it as much as you did.
Yeah.
Which is not always so common when you'd think of it as the one at the top is going to be the one that cares the most. And then as it goes down, people care less.
Yeah.
Right. And it sounds like what you've instilled in that organization was the fact that everybody is just as important as the next, and everybody contributes just as much as the next. So that's really, really cool to hear. My next question, I wanted to switch things up just a tiny bit in regards to, we talked a lot about your professional career. Now, how much would you say the themes that allowed you to have success in the professional world were repeatable or able to be replicated in your family life, how you treat your family or how you treat your personal life, your friends? How much of that would you say there's consistencies to?
Ooh, that's a tough question. You say, "Are you a good father?"
No, that's not.
No, I'm not particularly. But I was a better father than I am a grandfather. I'm terrible at that too. So I've taken I've often told my daughter I've transitioned from being a lousy father to being a lousy grandfather, and it was seamless. I was so into what I did that I'm sure I wasn't. My wife says this isn't true, but in my mind, I didn't spend as much time with my family as I could. Having said that, I was fortunate enough that my son was a ball boy from the time he was 8 years old, and so we were at every game together, and we traveled all over the country, and I talked to you about all those championships we won. Well, he was on Bill Davidson's private plane with me, and we went to L.A., and then we went to Tampa, and then we went back to L.A., and then we went back to Detroit, and he was there for all the awards. I'll tell you one quick story. So we're playing Game 7, and you're a big hockey guy, so you'll understand this. So we're playing Game 7, and we're up in the suite because we're playing in Tampa, and so the Stanley Cup is the most sacred trophy and the most wonderful trophy in sports and stuff like that. So they put the Stanley Cup in the basement, and they surround it with rope and stanchion because nobody will get it. So
you have the watcher too.
Yeah, and so it's on national TV. So they cut to a shot of the Stanley Cup, and the announcer is saying, "Well, you'll notice that there's nobody around it because no player will touch the Stanley Cup until they win it, and it's sacred," and so on and so forth. I'm not paying any attention. And then my wife calls me because she was home, and she says, "Hey, do you know where your son is?" And I says, "I really don't." She says, "Well, let me tell you where he is. He's crawled inside and he's hugging the Stanley Cup down there on national television." So
how old was he?
Okay, he was like 12 or something, 11 or 12.
Oh my goodness!
And so that was his moment of fame. But anyway, I think I always tried to remember where I came from, which was nowhere. And I think if there was anything that I don't say I take pride in or anything like that, is that I remembered that, but for, a break here or there. I mean, my whole life has been good fortune, I think, in terms of my professional life. And so that is what I did try and instill into my kids, that not that you're nobody, but you're nobody better than anybody else. And yes, we have a nice home, and yes, we have the ability to do some great things, and we travel to amazing places for games or concerts or whatever, and you can go do things and see things that most kids wouldn't have a chance to do. But you're no better than anybody else. And I would hope that you would never say, hey, do you know who I am, when you're coming to the palace and they're not letting you get to a particular place or anything like that. And so humility, it's a funny word, because it's like, well, you're being humble, meaning you're great. Well, you're not great. You're just a person, You're really just a person. And so we never let that in our business ever get in the way. I mean, you'd never see any of our people sort of strutting with their success. I hope.
Well, that was your expectation.
That was the expectation, of everybody. So, and so I hope I, conveyed that to my kids, and I think I have, because they're just good human beings. They really are caring and thoughtful and emotional in a good way and everything like that.
Well, one thing I'll tell you now, maybe you're not going to give yourself credit for, but I think that there's a lot to be said for the example you set, regardless of the time allocation. Obviously, your job demanded a lot of you in regards to flying across the country and doing all that, but who you were in those years and what you were doing something with a purpose, doing something that mattered, doing something for other people. I think that regardless of you being standing right next to your son or your daughter at that moment in time, they were watching that whole time, who you were, how you acted, how you treated people. And I think you'd be surprised at how much that affected them and benefited them. And even though it wasn't maybe you are always there with them. So I think you should give yourself a little more credit than you do.
Well, I'll tell you who I do give credit to is my wife. And I was lucky because I met her at the Silverdome, and we got married there. And so she was working the hours I was working. And so she understood what goes into
what the demands were going
to be, as opposed to, you meet somebody that works at Nordstrom's or something like that, and they're, why aren't you coming home? Why aren't you home? You're out 2 or 3 nights a week at basketball game. Then you go to a concert, and I'm raising these kids by myself.
Yeah.
So she was strong enough to say, get home, and I was weak enough to listen. But she also understood when I had to be there, I had to be there. And so she's a fabulous person. And so I give her a lot of credit for how well the kids turned out as people. So it was you never raise them by yourself, right?
Yeah. And how important would you say the support of her was all those years? I mean, I have to imagine you've expressed so many different ways that your life changed and your responsibilities changed, and you were in different places at different times. How much did her support mean to you? And do you credit a lot of your ability to do what you did through what she did for you?
Tons. I think that partnership is critical, and she's very bright and very perceptive in terms of people. And so there's a lot of pressure, and, I probably didn't realize how much pressure there was going on, but there were a lot of times I'd come home and say, boy, we've screwed up. I've hired a bad coach. I've hired a bad general manager. We're losing games. We're going to have to let the guy go. Davidson's not going to be happy with me here. And I'd just be complaining and complaining and complaining. And she'd had the ability to just say, okay, give it a second, step back. Okay, what did you do here? What did you do wrong? And she would sort of counsel me through, and at a time where sometimes you just need somebody to be an ear, and sometimes you need somebody to put things in perspective because you're so emotionally tied up.
You're so in it.
Yeah, you're so in it to a fault. And so, I give her a tremendous amount of credit. And I never forget that, even now that I'm sort of in my retirement years and things like that. I don't think there's a chance I would have accomplished what I've been able to accomplish without her.
Well, what's so interesting about the way that you just described that is almost similar to me, as when your salespeople or marketing department would come to you on how in the world am I going to get this done, or I'm stressed and I don't know how to do this. You were that person for them. And from everything that you've told me, you weren't telling them, do this, do that, do this. It was more presenting what maybe their strong suits are, or what they could potentially think of or do. And to me, it sounds like your wife was that person for you.
Yeah,
it wasn't even that she was necessarily telling you to do this, telling you to do that. It was more believe in yourself. Hey, you can do these things. You've done this in the past. It's presenting the belief that you can make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that's really important for people who are out there listening and everything like that is it's a lonely position. When you're at the top of an organization, a lot of times, and here's another thing I would have done against the book, where you can't sort of reveal weaknesses, or you can't sort of take your worries to your sales director or something like that. My best friends in the world were the people I worked with, and always have been. And a lot of folks will say, don't do that, because you got to make some tough decisions on these people, whether it's financial, whether it's career. Sometimes you might have to let them go or whatever. And I just felt I would rather, for myself, I would rather work with my friends and people that I'm close to, even if it's going to sometimes compromise our situation. We will accomplish so much more if we're in this thing together, completely together, than the experts tell you that you should be. And but having said that, there are certain things you sometimes you just don't take your weaknesses and your fears and everything like that there. You need somebody at home. And I think whoever your spouse or significant other is invaluable. And you get somebody who lines up the other way, who I'm tired of hearing this, well, that's all you need.
Yeah.
You gotta be able to go home and unload just a little bit.
No, 100%. Last question that I have for you here. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about your progression through your career and what you've been able to accomplish. And, I've noted a couple things that I've noticed as we've talked about it, but I'm curious if you were to maybe notate 3 things that were consistent through your career in regards to how you were able to repeat your successes over time. Because at the end of the day, as you said, you felt like your job was on the line every single day. And so to feel that way, and maybe you didn't feel that way every single day, but over the course of how long was your career in total? 30
years with the Pistons and 10 more with the Tigers and Red Wings, mostly Red Wings.
So moral of the story is 40 years doing something with the level of success that you've had. It wasn't all luck. I'll tell you that. You definitely did a lot of things specifically that were able to get you there. And so I'm curious from your perspective, what you can credit to what you've been able to do to consistently do things over time. Because it's one thing to get lucky, but I don't think luck repeats itself. Yeah. And so that's very important, I think, to note.
Well, I talked about culture, and I think when I was at with the Pistons and everything like that, we focused on that. When I went downtown to work with the Red Wings and everybody else, we took that with us and we established it very quickly. And as you talk to people, I remember when I left that place, the number of people that reached out to me to say what a life-changing thing it was. And it wasn't me. It just, we put them in an environment. We created an environment where they could succeed.
Well, I think it's important to note that you put yourself in a great culture as well. On top of the fact that obviously you created it over time, but in terms of just getting started out, how important it is to put yourself in an environment that's a good culture.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. You're right. And I think commitment is a big piece of it. I mean, I was into it like every day. I mean, you're going to have days where you're not as into it as other, or something else in your personal life is slowing you down or whatever. But I had so much passion for what I did. And you always tell your kids, when they're growing up, find your passion, find something where you're not going to work every day. You're going to fun every day.
Yeah.
And I found it. And I think because I could enjoy it, I could take that feeling and spread it through the organization. I think that's important.
I think that passion that you're describing as well, I think that almost allows for the creativity. So you continue to talk about how you came up with all these amazing ideas. It's because you were interested in it, though. Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that people are less creative or less willing to engage in how do I figure this out, like a puzzle or a game like you described, if they're not interested in the subject matter.
Right.
So because of the fact that you're so interested and a lover of the sports industry as a whole, I think that maybe inspired and brought a lot of the creativity that you brought to the industry.
I think so. I think you're probably right about that. I think the other thing, which is going to seem like a ridiculous thing, is have fun. And I used to always tell the people, like, when they'd be moaning and groaning about something, or a decision was made above them, or this or that. I say, hey, we're in the fun business. This is the fun business. I mean, our worst day is somebody else's best day working in insurance. Or I use that as that's a
Yeah.
bad example, but our worst day. We're here to give people fun. We're here to have a concert where I used to always talk about Pine Knob or DTE, and I said, what do I love about that? I love it because there's no wins and losses. I'm never driving home from Pine Knob going like, we should have made that shot. We should have done this. We should have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 people. Whether I like the show or not, they're out there having a great time under the sunshine or whatever whatever it is outside. And this is the way we make our living. They're coming down to see a show at the Palace or at Little Caesars Arena by the thousands. And that's our job, is to give them a good night. What a great way to make a living. So don't forget, have fun. Enjoy this. You're never going to have another career that's as much fun as this is. And sometimes they buy it. Sometimes they don't buy it that day, but they remember it the next day or the day after when something good happens. And you go, God, what a great way. What a great life.
Yeah. No, that is amazing. Sometimes maybe you wish you had a seat at the front row where you could just look up at everybody, because you can imagine all the smiling faces. I feel like that's exactly what you're describing right there.
Well, there were times I remember when we first opened the Palace, and it was in the owner's suite or something like that, just looking out at full seats all the way around and just going, I can't believe we pulled this off. I can't believe we did this against all odds and everything like that. So the nice thing about that business is you have losses, but you have great wins and great nights and great enjoyment.
Yeah. Last thing, I just want to leave the viewers with one more thing. If you were looking at going back to day one, in terms of some of the people that are going to be watching this haven't found what that is for them, or haven't found the motivation to really be fired up about what they're going to do, what would be your advice in regards to just getting started? Maybe is it finding your passion first? Is it, what would that start look like if people are struggling with getting in motion? Because you said it's one thing to have an idea in your head, but another to actually take a step forward and get yourself moving in the right direction.
I think a little bit of something we talked about before, and this is a conversation I had with my kids again. Sometimes you just got to get off the couch, and take a job. Just
Start doing something.
Yeah, and that may not be where you end up. Maybe you start in this industry. I don't really want to be in that industry. Okay, but you're going to learn things every day. You're going to learn what's good and what's bad, what to do in this situation, what not to do. You're going to mature, you're going to grow, and you're going to get exposed to people. You're going to get exposed to systems, processes, whatever it might happen to be, whether you know it or not. It's all happening around you. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you can take your professional career and figure out a way to make it a game, make it a challenge, make it something that even if you didn't think you wanted to do this, do it, because you're going to get better at it. And eventually a door is going to open that's going to take you into something else. Don't settle for whatever it is you're doing. Keep your eye on something that, because today a lot of my friends in college had no idea where they wanted to go. And I think that's true of most people in college. You start and either you come out doing something completely different, or you just take the first job that comes to you. You really don't know. We never really know. We just sort of wake up one day and say, this is what I'm doing. But I think you got to have enjoyment. You will not be successful unless you enjoy what it is you do, and keep looking for whatever that is, or change the rules so that you can enjoy what you're doing.
Exactly. Yep. To me, it sounds like the only way you don't continue to progress in the right direction is by not taking action at all.
That's right.
At the end of the day,
that's right.
The type of action that it is doesn't even necessarily matter, because as you said, you're going to figure that out along the way. But the only way to guarantee that you're not going to get to where you want to be is to not do anything.
That's right. That's right.
So, well, that's going to cap us off for today. Thank you so much, Tom, for your time and insights that you provided. There's going to be so much that everybody learns from this. I learned a ton just from sitting here for an hour and 20 minutes with you. It's been a pleasure. So thank you all for making the time to learn today and believing that there's a possibility that life can be better. And we will see you next time. Please never stop pursuing precision. And that's it, Tom.
You did.
All right, everybody. That will conclude our interview with Tom Wilson. I, again, am so grateful to have had the opportunity to sit down next to this gentleman, and I hope that you guys took away as much as I did. I'm going to go through now the top 3 things that I took away from this interview and am going to hopefully apply to my life. I hope there's so much more that you guys took from this, but I'm going to highlight the 3 most important things that I found. Number 1, you must show that you believe in your team, sometimes more than they believe in themselves, if you want them to perform to their best ability. What I mean by this is when Tom would tell stories about how he led his team and how they were able to always continue to come up with new ideas and ultimately utilize all the skills and different traits that everybody within the team had, it all came from him inspiring them, him believing in them, him expressing that they had the power and the ability to do great things. And rather than the boss that's telling them exactly what to do, he instead would ask them questions about how they were going to come up with the answer and truly instilled a sense of belief that they could figure it out with his support. 2, when you ask powerful questions, you force yourself and put yourself in a position to come up with powerful answers. So what I found when Tom would talk about dealing with his team and ultimately inspiring them to create great results was that he would ask incredibly powerful questions that would force his team to think in ways that would ultimately give a powerful result, or maybe an out-of-the-box result that typically people wouldn't be thinking of, right? So his job was ultimately getting these employees, these salespeople, to think in different ways and opening their minds to different possibilities that they maybe wouldn't have come up with on their own. And so, again, I have to reiterate the power that he showed came from ultimately inspiring his team and making them think in different ways. 3, if you think bigger than everybody else in your industry, you're going to get bigger and better results. And what I mean by this is when a number of the other teams in his industry, so that could have been other basketball teams when he was running with the Pistons, or a number of other situations where he was looking at just creating a better experience for the event that he was hosting, right? But when we're talking about particularly in basketball, while all the other teams might be looking at other teams in the field to see what are they doing, how are they having success, what's working for them, instead, Tom was looking at other industries completely outside of basketball or even the entertainment business whatsoever. And he would look into companies like McDonald's, companies like Disney, some of the biggest companies in the world. And what he would do is take some of the successful aspects of that business and ultimately try to apply it to his business. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what business you're in, he saw the success that they were having, which was at a magnitude far beyond what he was doing in his business. And he wanted to bring that element into the business that he was in. So he was thinking way bigger than anybody else that he was competing with. And no surprise, he was able to get much bigger results. All right, guys, I want to thank you one final time for tuning in and watching this thing all the way through. I hope you got as much out of this interview as I did. Be sure to stay tuned for next week's interview. It's going to be another great one, and there's going to be so many more lessons to learn from here on out. So stay tuned, and we will see you soon. Never stop pursuing precision.